Welcome to the debate. Imagine an impending hurricane. A Category 5 storm is bearing down on your city. The emergency sirens are shrieking, the sky has turned this terrifying, bruised purple, and the authorities are broadcasting on every channel that the physical infrastructure of your town is simply going to collapse under the surge.
Yeah, it's a complete disaster scenario.
Exactly. And your response to this massive, structural, existential threat is to go into your living room, draw the blinds, sit quietly on a cushion, light a single candle, and begin meticulously realigning your internal energy centers. To an outside observer, that looks like profound denial or, honestly, madness.
Right. Well, it's not just denial. I mean, it looks like an absolute abdication of reality. You are essentially standing in the middle of the street, bracing for a meteorological catastrophe with a metaphysical umbrella.
A metaphysical umbrella, exactly.
It's absurd. There is a fundamental, almost comical mismatch between the nature of the physical threat bearing down on you and the nature of the defense you've chosen.
But let's play with that analogy for a second. What if the storm itself isn't a natural weather event? What if the hurricane is actually being generated by the collective internal chaos, the panic, and the fractured energy of the people within the city?
Okay, that is a fascinating premise.
Right? If that were true, then the only way to actually dissipate the hurricane would be to first quiet the mind, to reclaim your own sovereignty so that you fundamentally stop feeding your energy into the storm.
I hear you, but that is an incredibly tall order when the wind is already, tearing the roof off your house.
Absolutely. And that is the exact dissonance we are diving into today. We are looking at a deeply fascinating text, Alessio Favaretto's book, Be a Hero, Decode Your Greatness.
Yeah, a really provocative read.
I have to admit, when I first read through this material, I was struck by how jarring the dichotomy is. Because on one hand, Favaretto is diagnosing massive, systemic, structural, global threats. I will be taking the position today that the internal spiritual solutions he proposes are actually the only viable defense against those threats.
And I will be arguing the opposite side. Because jarring is the perfect word for it. The book explicitly warns us about being on the precipice of World War III. It talks about nuclear proliferation.
It really does not hold back on the doom.
Not at all. It details artificial intelligence algorithms that are actively designed to outsmart human cognition and determine our destinies. It warns of a looming cashless society, biometric data tracking, and a small elite cabal of billionaires operating in secret. They are essentially acting as gods on Earth to push a great reset. These are hard metal geopolitical materialistic threats.
He paints a picture of a world where human beings are literally being reduced to what he calls disposable liabilities. We're just managed by this cold, omnipotent, cloud-based machine. But then...
Here comes the pivot.
Right, and this is where I initially had to put the book down and make sure I hadn't skipped chapters. The solution the text offers to this global dystopian nightmare is almost entirely internal, esoteric, and highly personal.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't tell you to run for local office or learn cybersecurity. Instead, it proposes taking a sacramentum, which is a sacred oath to oneself.
Exactly.
It focuses heavily on balancing your chakras, reprogramming your DNA through something called the biological internet, and spending an enormous amount of time mastering the romantic dynamics of your personal relationships.
Which raises a massive question, and it's the one we are going to wrestle with today. Can a methodology of individual, internal spiritual transformation actually serve as a viable weapon against the structural, existential global threats identified in the text?
It's the core issue.
I came away from this book convinced that it absolutely can, and in fact, it must. I look at this material and see the argument that individual human sovereignty, reclaiming our emotional, psychological, and spiritual autonomy, is the necessary and truly the only viable defense against a corrupt system designed to strip us of our humanity.
That's a bold claim.
You cannot defeat a machine by becoming part of its mechanical warfare. You defeat it by becoming something the machine cannot process, a fully sovereign, untouchable human being.
And I look at the exact same material and see a massive category error in strategy. I deeply appreciate the text's robust syllabus for personal development. It's a wonderful guide for self-actualization.
It really is.
There is a profound mismatch of scale here. The individualized metaphysical solutions the text offers, like relying on numerology, Utilizing the Silva method to lower your brainwaves or relying on positive mindset reframing are fundamentally insufficient. They cannot dismantle the material, structural mechanisms of global control that the author so urgently warns us about.
I completely understand why you see it as a mismatch of scale. When you look at a drone or a digital currency, a chakra alignment seems, well, laughable. But I want to explore how the text frames the very nature of the problem, because it shifts the entire paradigm.
Go on.
The book explicitly asserts that corruption is a human disease. It is not a technological glitch. It is not an economic oversight. It is a moral and spiritual failing.
Sure.
So if the root of the problem is fundamentally human, then the solution must also be fundamentally human. The foundational principle from the Be a Hero code states, and I quote, "If there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm."
Okay, but let's ground that. No enemy within is a beautiful Stoic concept. But how does having no internal enemies stop a central bank from freezing my digital wallet if they don't like my social credit score?
It applies because the true threat of the machine, the biometric tracking, the carbon taxes, the algorithms, is not just physical control. The text argues that the real danger is the erosion of free thinking, freedom of action, and freedom of emotion.
Right, psychological compliance.
Exactly. The system requires your psychological compliance to function. It needs you to operate on its frequency. Therefore, the personal transformation tools the author provides, like growing the heart of a lion and focusing on adding value first, are not retreats from the world.
You think they're offensive tactics?
They are acts of profound rebellion. By refusing to operate on the system's frequencies of fear and scarcity, the individual becomes untouchable. You starve the system of the human compliance it needs to survive.
I hear that, but I come at it from a completely different angle. I acknowledge the psychological appeal of personal empowerment. It feels incredibly good to believe that if we just fix ourselves, the world will magically fix itself.
It's not magic, though.
Well, it gives us an illusion of control. But we have to look at the inescapable contradiction in the text's scale. The author explicitly warns us about small-minded, power-hungry psychopaths pushing carbon taxes, controlling the press, and operating in secret. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar global warfare apparatus.
Which is terrifying.
In 2020 alone, global warfare expenditure was nearly $2 trillion, according to the text.
And Favaretto goes out of his way to point out how tragic that misallocation of human resources is.
Yes, it is tragic, but look at the proposed countermeasures. Responding to a $2 trillion warfare machine with internal practices like the magic mirror technique?
Where you look at yourself to affirm your own worth.
Right. Or exploring your top 2 needs from Chapter 12. That is a category error of massive proportions. Structural, political, and economic power cannot be neutralized merely by decoding your own greatness.
But
let me just finish this thought. The mechanisms of control described here are enforced by law, by military might, and by economic coercion. An internal shift in consciousness, no matter how profound, does not automatically dismantle a data server in a billionaire's bunker that is tracking your biometric footprint.
I see the logic there. But I think you are looking at the conflict through the exact materialistic paradigm that those corrupt billionaires want you to use.
How so?
The text specifically calls out that under this current system, human beings are becoming products to be managed. The defense, therefore, is to step entirely outside of that system's paradigm. If you fight them on their terms, money, politics, physical force, you lose because they own the board.
I can hear our listeners rolling their eyes right now, though. Stepping outside the paradigm sounds great, but how does that actually stop them from executing their agenda?
By accessing a higher order of power. I was confused by this at first, too, until I really dug into the chapter on the biological internet. The book posits that human DNA isn't just a physical blueprint. It operates as a biological router.
A router. Okay.
Yes, it claims we are capable of connecting to the frequency of the universe, what the text refers to as zero-point energy. By utilizing the biological internet, humans tap into an abundant galaxy of potential.
Right.
The text points out the absurdity of the elite's mindset. They are small-minded psychopaths fighting over a gram of sand and a drop of oil, while an entire infinite galaxy is available to us.
Sure, metaphorically.
But the cure to the material threat is to evolve past the need for the material scarcity they control. When you reprogram your cellular frequency and tap into network intelligence, their control over that gram of sand becomes entirely irrelevant to your existence.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that mechanism. And let me tell you why, using the text's own internal logic.
Go for it.
The book features a very prominent quote from Giovanni Falcone. He said, "Follow the money, and you'll find the mafia." Now, Falcone was a brilliant Italian judge who gave his life fighting organized crime in Sicily.
Right, a true historical hero.
Exactly. But let's look at his methodology. Falcone didn't fight the Sicilian mafia using zero-point energy. He didn't dismantle the mob through water reprogramming.
Well, let's briefly explain water reprogramming for the audience. This is the idea popularized by Masaru Emoto, that human intention and words can literally alter the molecular structure of water.
Right.
And since we are 70% water, we can reprogram our physical reality through our thoughts.
Exactly. And it's a lovely poetic thought. But Falcone didn't use that. He fought the mafia with rigorous, materialist, structural tools: forensic accounting, banking records, subpoenas, and prosecutions. He followed the paper trail of corrupt capital.
I see the contrast you're making.
So how does the text reconcile this? It quotes a man who literally tracked physical banking records to destroy corruption, asks the reader to similarly be the antidote of corruption, but then in chapter 16 directs the reader's energy toward practices like numerology and feng shui.
Well,
If we are facing a global cabal orchestrating a great reset, shouldn't our tools look more like Falcone's forensic accounting and less like analyzing our natal charts? The mechanics of dismantling corruption require external friction, not just internal harmony.
that's a compelling contrast. But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the psychological realism that underpins the entire text. You mentioned Falcone, but remember that external activism, even brilliant legal activism, ultimately fails or gets co-opted if the individuals executing it are still driven by fear.
Okay.
The BEA HERO code explicitly asks, what is your biggest obstacle? And the prescribed answer is myself. It asks, who is your biggest enemy? Answer, myself.
But the billionaires are the ones orchestrating the reset, not my internal shadow.
Yes, but they can only orchestrate the reset because the general population is paralyzed by fear. And I love how the text redefines this. FEAR, false evidence of actual reality.
The acronym. Right.
The system controls us through propaganda. It feeds us false evidence to manipulate our behavior and keep us compliant. To fight this, the book provides highly structured logical tools. Take the RAID process, risk assessment, important decision.
Right. The decision-making framework.
Exactly. This isn't just fluffy positive thinking. RAID is a rigorous mental framework. It is a cognitive firewall designed to build individuals who fundamentally will not, as the code says, let other people's opinions become my reality.
I agree that's a useful tool.
If you have a population that uses RAID to critically assess media narratives, to manage their own emotional triggers, and to refuse to internalize manufactured panic, the propaganda machine breaks down.
You think it just stops working?
It simply stops working. The internal tool is the mechanism that destroys the external weapon.
Okay, the RAID process is practical, but have you considered the text's broader definition of reality itself? In the BEA HERO code, reality is defined merely as the meaning of perception. It goes further to ask what the difference is between positive and negative, and the answer is only thinking makes it so.
Which, to be fair, is a classic foundational Stoic principle.
It is a Stoic principle, but when applied to the macro geopolitical issues the text itself raises, it borders on toxic positivity. Let's look at a concrete example from the text, like carbon taxes restricting freedom.
Okay, sure.
If a global cabal is erasing inalienable human rights, replacing your bodily autonomy with biometric tracking, and deciding where you are allowed to travel based on your carbon footprint, suggesting that only thinking makes it so is deeply problematic.
But it changes your relationship to the restriction.
Does it, though? A digital barrier restricting your ability to buy food isn't negative just because you perceive it as negative. It is an objective, material restriction of your freedom.
I see where you're going with this.
Right? Because if we simply reframe our perception to view our enslavement positively,
If we say, well, I'm confined to a 15-minute city, but I'm going to view it as an opportunity for localized living, we haven't dismantled the cabal.
We've just accepted it.
Exactly. We've just made ourselves incredibly comfortable in the cage. Thinking positively about a totalitarian surveillance state does not short-circuit its data servers.
I completely understand the risk of complacency there, but I don't believe the text is advocating for passive acceptance of a cage. It's advocating for proactive, localized power generation. Let me offer an analogy to explain how this internal work actually scales up to global change, because it took me a minute to grasp the mechanics of it myself.
I'm listening.
Think of the current global power structure. The billionaires, the algorithms, the banks, like a massive, highly centralized, corrupt electrical grid. They own the power plants, and they can shut off your lights whenever they want. Your argument is that to stop them, we need to march on the power plant, rip out the wires, and dismantle it.
Yes. Or at the very least, build a competing power plant using the same laws of physics.
But the tech's strategy is entirely different. What if instead of attacking the plant, every single house in the city learns how to generate its own solar power?
Oh, I see.
You can't power a whole city with one battery. But if every individual house becomes sovereign and self-sustaining, which is what the text means by adding value first and decoding your greatness, the central corrupt power plant becomes completely obsolete.
That is a great analogy.
Right? It simply loses its monopoly on power and goes bankrupt. The text actually emphasizes this kind of collective action. It explicitly states, this journey was never meant to be walked alone. It urges readers to become hero mentors, to build connections through shared values, and to use the power of one to forge a unified front.
To safeguard the world we share?
Exactly. That is an isolationist. It's a decentralized network of sovereign individuals, rendering a centralized, corrupt system powerless.
I love the solar panel analogy, and I absolutely acknowledge the text's call to community. The vision of a decentralized network of empowered, self-sustaining individuals is a beautiful one. But again, we have to rigorously scrutinize the actual mechanics of how that community operates within the framework of the book.
How so?
When you look at the middle chapters, the community-building tools focus heavily on things like the SOS star, which is essentially an internal compass for personal meaning, and the pretending game, and defining deeply personal definitions of success.
All of which are essential for human thriving.
I agree. Creating a community of fulfilled, psychologically healthy individuals is a noble goal. But the text sets up a premise where this community of fulfilled individuals is supposed to save a world teetering on the precipice of nuclear annihilation and AI domination. That places an impossible, almost crushing burden on the concepts of self-fulfillment and romantic relationship mastery.
Wait, why do you say it places a burden on romantic relationships?
Look at the sections on the self-lovers radio, and particularly the peafowl relationship. The book uses the analogy of a male peacock displaying its vibrant colors to explain how partners need to constantly display varied, vibrant energies to keep romance alive.
It's a beautiful metaphor for effort in a relationship.
It is. It spends vast sections exploring how to balance intimacy, thrill, and sensuality to keep love energy charged. It's rich, fascinating material. Has a syllabus for marital counseling? It's great.
But
The book is promising that if my partner and I master the amplifier of our romantic needs, we are somehow thwarting World War III. The gap between the micro-spiritual prescription, have a vibrant, thrilling marriage, and the macro-political diagnosis, a global cabal is trying to digitize humanity, remains a chasm.
you don't think they connect?
I just don't see how mastering marital intimacy stops an AI algorithm from replacing human labor. The mechanics simply do not connect the two domains.
I would argue they connect perfectly when you understand the true nature of the battlefield. The system's ultimate goal isn't just to take your money or restrict your travel. The system's ultimate goal is the destruction of the human soul.
Okay, that's a very philosophical take on it.
But it's true to the text. The family unit, true love, human intimacy, organic connection, these are the very things the Great Reset and transhumanism seek to digitize, commodify, and ultimately destroy. By fiercely protecting your humanity, your capacity for true love, and your spiritual vitality, you are actively resisting the machine's agenda to turn you into a disposable liability.
That is a powerful way to frame it.
Loving fiercely in a world designed to make you numb is a structural defense.
But is it enough? I mean, can we genuinely love our way out of a nuclear strike?
I think the book's premise is that if enough of us reclaim what it calls the cave I fear to enter, our own internal darkness, our own unhealed trauma, we change the frequency of human interaction entirely, making the very concept of a nuclear strike obsolete, because the consciousness that would launch it no longer exists.
That is certainly an optimistic view of human evolution.
And that really brings us to the core of where we stand today. I walk away from this material believing that Be a Hero, Decode Your Greatness provides the ultimate foundational blueprint for resistance. You simply cannot dismantle a corrupt, dehumanizing system without first rebuilding the human spirit.
Right.
The esoteric, the psychological, and the personal tools provided in this text, whether it's the raid process, the sacramentum, or yes, even the relationship advice, are not distractions from the geopolitical threat. They're the necessary armor required to remain truly human in an increasingly digitized and hostile age. By mastering the self, we render the corrupt systems of the world obsolete.
And I walk away from it with a very different conclusion. I think the book offers a rich, incredibly eclectic syllabus for personal development, self-discovery, and relationship management.
It really does.
It does. But as a thesis for global change, it struggles massively with scale. It sets up a structural geopolitical Goliath, complete with global warfare, systemic corruption, and technological dystopia. But then, it equips the reader with a metaphysical slingshot.
A slingshot can still take down a giant, though.
Maybe. But the tension between its terrifying macro-political diagnosis and its inward-looking micro-spiritual prescriptions remains fundamentally unresolved for me. We cannot simply meditate away a global surveillance state. And conflating internal peace with external freedom is, well, that's a dangerous game.
And perhaps that is the exact paradox the author wants us to wrestle with. We have to ask ourselves whether the path to saving the world requires us to march on the capitals and fight the power plants.
Or whether it truly begins by venturing into that cave I fear to enter to face ourselves first.
Exactly. We leave it to you, the listener, to dive into the material, explore these concepts, and form your own conclusions on the mechanics of global and personal change.
Will you brace for the hurricane with force, or will you find the stillness within to dissipate the storm?
Thank you for joining us on The Debates.